All right, welcome back. Unit 2. We're going to go ahead and start in the textbook here and listen to this conversation. These people are talking about where they live and their jobs. So let's go ahead and listen to that.
So, where do you live?
Well, I'm from New York, but I live in Chicago.
Interesting. And what do you do?
I'm an English teacher. What about you?
I'm a doctor. I work in a hospital in Seattle.
Really? My sister lives in Seattle.
What does she do?
She's a singer.
And what's her name?
Susie Davis?
Susie. I know her.
Really? Small world.
Small world. What does that mean, small world? It means everybody knows everybody, or seems like everybody knows everybody. So yeah, they had a conversation about where they live and what they do, and it turns out that they know somebody. They both know somebody. So let's go through this together. All right, so where do you live? Well, I'm from New York. That means originally I'm from New York, but I live in, where did she say, or he say? Chicago. Chicago. Interesting. What do you do? We saw that before. What do you do? Talking about your job. I'm an English teacher. 아, 진짜 나도. 와, 신기하다. What about you? Right? So what about you? Very common to ask the same question to somebody else. What about you? Same question to you. I'm a doctor. I work in a hospital in Seattle. Really? My sister lives in Seattle. What does she do? The question there. She's a singer. What's her name? Susie Davis. Susie? I know her. Really? Small world. So that small world we say when kaptagi, right? Suddenly you realize you know the same person. You know the same person. It seems like a small world. All right, and when we do this live in class, I want you to go ahead and change these details, right? So you can add these details here up to number 1, architect, actor, and create something for number 2, and then a writer, police officer, and dang dang for number 3, right? So you can create those details in there. All right, so let's talk about how we ask these questions. Let's go to the next page. Talking about how we ask these questions. The common questions that we're going to use in this situation are the WH questions, which are really common. Right, so the what do you do, talking about your job. Where do you live? I live in Rio. What does she do? Right, subject she. Where does she go to school? So that's asking location. Where does she go to school? She goes to NYU. Anybody know NYU? New York University. What do they do? So the subject is they, more than one person. So that's going to be they are. They are pilots. And who do they work for? So this is another option. Who do they work for means the company. Work for. Who do they work for? They work for Korean Air, right? So there's the company. They work for Korean Air. Where do they work? Also location. They work in an airport. All right, so let's take another look at this kind of structure in the PPT file here. So where, right? Where is going to be location. Where do you work? So we have the structure, location, do, subject, work, which is very common. So just try to remember that. All right, so where do you work is common. And then this always changes together, this he, she, or it person's name. It's always going to be changing, the verb will change the same. So where does, where does, where does, right? Where does she work? And then where do they work? They, more than one, right? So let's take a look at the some different ways to say this, to respond. So work and be. two types of verbs that we use when talking about our jobs and careers. One is focusing on the location, right? I work in a hospital. I work in a school. I work in a company. And to be is going to be focusing on the position. I am a doctor. I am a teacher. I am a office worker, right? So one is going to be location, one is going to be position, but they mean the same thing. So you work in a momo, you are a momo, right? So you work in a university, you are a professor. All right, he works, she works, and name of a person, Jim, John, Kyungmin, Sungi, right? Works in a momo. They work in a momo. They are momo. Like we saw before in the example, they work in an airline. They are pilots, right? So the airline company, they are pilots. And we work in a, we are momo, right? So those are the kind of examples focusing here just on location versus position. Location versus position. So some other examples that we would look at. So my father works in a company, right? Just a general company. If you want to be more specific, you can say in an engineering company. So you can continue to add information and you can add the type of company, right? Engineering company. They work for a university, just any university, or they work for Ulsan University, being more specific, more detail. My mother works in the government, so the government kind of like, excuse me, considered a company, right, in the government. She works as a civil servant, right? So that's going to be position. I work in the shipping industry. We could also talk about industry, right? The type of industry. And he works in the what, right? Communication industry. We can say semiconductor industry, anything we want to put in here as far as industry. Again, here we see for, working for a company. She works for Hyundai Corporation or in Hyundai Corporation. Both of those are useful in those situations. So you can use both of those. And then here we have some more conversation, just conversation examples. What does your, you can put anything in here, right? What does your friend do? What does your father do? What does your mother do? That's asking about their job, their career, their position, brother or sister, right? So again, you can just change that in your answer. My mother is a momo. My brother is a momo. That's the pattern. Dung, 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 dung. Again, location, where? Where does your sister work? Where does your brother work? Where does your father work, right? This is going to be more about the location. My father works in a company. My mother works in a school, right? So that's going to just be the pattern practice that I want you to get used to for question and answer. So when you're having conversation, and we can practice this when we're in class, later in the future or during your video recording, you can ask and answer these questions as part of conversation. All right. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's jump back into our book. And on the next page, or same page, sorry, we're just going to go ahead and complete these activities really quickly, just so we can comprehend. All right, so what do you do is the example. I'm an office worker. So right now we should be on Unit 1 on page 12. Unit 1, or sorry, Activity 1, page 12. Number 2, where do you live? Also, this is location. What do you think it is, right? I live, it's probably going to be in, and Sao Paulo, if you don't know, is a city in Brazil. It's not letting me check these. Sao Paulo, right? What does your sister do? That's asking about job. So probably she, sister, she is an architect, right? And where do your friends go to school? Obviously, it's going to be your friends, plural. It's going to be they, right? They go to University of Texas. All right, now let's go down here to the next activity, activity 2. Go ahead and finish these up together. All right, so what do you think this is? This conversation here, conversation number 1. Where, momo, you, momo. Where do you live? Okay, location. Where do you live? So that person, I live in Los Angeles. Very simple. What do you do? Right? Correct. So asking about a job. So here we have I, dang dang, an actor. So probably I'm or I am. 여러분 똑똑해요. 어려워요? 안나지? I don't think so. So number 2, conversation here. Where? Talking about location. Where? So your sister. What is that? Do, does, am, does. Where does your sister live, work? Both could be options. What do you think here? Live. She, was it going to be works, lives in Seoul? So question again, what? So she, what is that? She, what do she do? No, what does she do? Talking about her job. She is a teacher, or she's a teacher. So pretty simple, pretty easy understanding. Last thing we'll do in the book today is a little bit of pronunciation practice. Now this is very important just because, as you know, in the textbook versus how people actually speak sounds really, really different. Even for me, when I'm studying Korean, right? Nobody talks the way that the textbook says, right? 뭐 하십니까? That's never how it sounds. Well, yeah, it's totally different. So this is the reduction. This reduced means to make it shorter. Reduce, make it shorter. Think about, for example, in Korean, Starbucks. Starbucks? No, nobody says Starbucks. Everybody says Suba, right? Starbucks. Or Mr. Pizza, Mipi, right? Those kinds of things, that's an example of a reduction. So it's going to be reducing to a more common form. So let's practice this. Repeat after me. What do you do changes to what do you do? Go ahead and repeat that. What do you do? What do you do? Same thing here. What do you study? That's talking about your major. What's your major? Are you a chemistry major, engineering major, nutrition major? I study nutrition. I study English. I study engineering. What do you study? Go. What do you study? And then we have the question, where, location. Where do you live? That becomes where do you? Where do you live? Where do you? Where do you live? Where do you go? Where do you? Where do you go? Where do you go? All right, so that kind of pronunciation is much more common in the conversational type speaking of English. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video there. We will move into the next section of the PowerPoint presentation, talk about some things there, and then we will finish up the class and talk about some changes coming to the class style. Changey, 와요. All right, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.